what Richard Benveniste was talking about there is what we have partially on the screen here, the August 6th, 2001 PDB, or President's Daily Brief. It's a remarkable document, though just a page and a half long. As we can see quite clearly, we had some idea that something was going to happen. We were caught off guard not because there was no one ringing the alarm bell. We were caught off guard because there was no one listening for that alarm bell. When the Commission finished on the 21st of August, 2004, they issued their report. Several hundred pages long. What we have here is the executive summary. Two sides to the equation: failures and recommendations. On the side of failures, excuse me. Number 1, CIA HUMINT, Central Intelligence Agency Human Intelligence. A breakdown in our human intelligence gathering ability, in no small part because of backlash against covert actions taken by the CIA in the 1960s and the 1970s, and the hearings that were held before Congress in the late 1970s on this subject. It's what Richard Clarke called a risk-averse climate. Number 2, DoD unengaged, Department of Defense unengaged. According to the report, the Department of Defense was still essentially on a Cold War footing, with its eyes not on non-state actors, but rather on major state players like Russia. And at the moment this happened, no one really remembers this, but we had quite a little row with China going over a downed American, what they were calling spy plane, in Chinese territorial waters, and the Chinese were holding the members of the crew as possible spies. Number 3, NORAD, Strategic Air Command. The people tasked during the Cold War with manning and in unthinkable situations, launching our intercontinental ballistic missiles. NORAD looked outward. The radars were not turned inward to see things like these planes going off course inside the boundaries of the continental United States. Number 4, the FBI overmatched to the task. According to the report, the FBI simply did not have manpower, and on the other hand, a focus on terrorism as an international problem. Number 5 is related to that. FBI, quote, geared towards prosecution. One of the major findings of this commission was that the Clinton administration had approached the problem of terrorism from what could be a law enforcement angle. If you're looking to prosecute someone, you're looking to gather evidence. You maybe are even looking to allow them to perpetrate part or all of their crime before you arrest them. Of course, that's not necessarily possible when that crime would involve mass murder. Number 6, FAA unprepared for suicide hijacking. We've seen hijackings in this class. Entebbe in 1976, the People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a member militia of the PLO, hijacked that Air France flight and flew it to Entebbe, Uganda. They didn't fly that plane into a building. Nothing like this had ever happened before, quite frankly. And though, as we've saw in these clips in the testimony, that the concept had popped up in the intelligence community from time to time, it was hardly number 1 on the list of probable outcomes from a hijacking. And so, when the planes were hijacked, there was not a thought process of, we need to bring them down. Number 7, failed diplomacy. This is in regards to Afghanistan, in regards to the Taliban. Taliban had been in power since 1996, and Al-Qaeda had been there the entire time. Of course, Al-Qaeda had been there the entire time because bin Laden and members of that organization had been in Afghanistan since the Soviet invasion, all the way back in the late 1980s. Failed diplomacy that allowed Al-Qaeda to have that safe haven and that training ground in Afghanistan. And finally, great permeable borders. I think this one goes without saying. We had 19 hijackers here in the United States, all of them here on false pretenses, some of them here outstaying visas, overstaying visas, and so we had a breakdown of the INS, the Immigration and Naturalization Service, something that no longer exists, actually. Its functions being wrapped up into the Department of Homeland Security. On the other side of the equation, we have the recommendations. 3 in number. The first is self-evident and hardly required the massive research effort and report to come to this conclusion, but it is important nonetheless. Attack terrorists and sponsors, such as Afghanistan, the Taliban, and of course, the people they're hiding, Al-Qaeda. Of course, we would actually attack terrorists and their sponsors. That would involve Saudi Arabia, because unfortunately a lot of Saudi money is behind groups like Al-Qaeda, after all. Bin Laden is a Saudi, and 15 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi. Saudi money builds the radical madrasas in Pakistan, in which many members of the Taliban were trained. After all, what is the word Taliban? It's students of Islamic knowledge, as we learned in the last lecture. Number 2, win the war of ideas. This one's important. This one's extraordinarily important. This report argues that the battle we are waging is not a military one. It's an ideological one. And an ideological war cannot be won with bombs, guns, and planes. In some respects, it's like the Cold War. Kids in Moscow wanted to wear Levi's, they wanted to drink Coca-Cola, and they wanted to listen to Van Halen. Kids in New York did not want to wear a babushka, they did not want to work on a collective farm, and they did not listen to, I don't even know, a band from the Soviet Union. Fill in the blank. We won the war of ideas in the Cold War. Our system was more attractive, and our system won. Some people say we won the Cold War because we outspent the Soviets on military equipment. That's part of the equation, to be sure. But it's not the entire story. It's a story about an ideological struggle between a free and open society and a planned, centralized society. And we won. And this war is going to be the same thing. It's a war of ideas. And our system needs to be attractive. And our system needs to be the one that the rest of the world wants to emulate. And that's how we will defeat Al-Qaeda and groups like them. And finally, number 3 is again a bit of a no-duh. Prepare for another attack. There's not been another attack on the American homeland. However, since 2001, there have been many, many attacks overseas, carried out by Al-Qaeda, and of course, thousands, if not tens of thousands of attacks carried out on American soldiers by Al-Qaeda in Iraq between 2003 and 2007.